Have you tried popular manifestation practices to make a change in your life and still can't seem to manifest your desires? Have you been struggling with a problem in life that doesn't seem to have an apparent solution? Or perhaps you've just felt popular manifestation guidance just feels hollow and incomplete. I have uncovered a simple framework that can help fix any problem in your life or manifest any one of your desires. Yes, it is true. In this video, we will explore the framework that I call the 5 layers of consciousness, why most people are addressing their issues and desires from an improper vantage point, and how to get to the source of any issue or manifestation goal to bring about the meaningful changes in life that you're looking for. Now, all of us at some point or another want to fix or improve an external circumstance of our lives, whether it's overcoming a fear, attracting a partner, earning more money, treating an illness, performing better at a chosen endeavor, acquire a new house, so on and so forth. But the vast majority of people only seek to improve their results by staying on the same level of consciousness that created their lack of results. It has been said that one cannot fix a problem by being in the same state of consciousness that created that problem. The reason you don't have what you want is because of your level of consciousness. Therefore, to get what you want, you must change your level of consciousness. What we will explore here is a framework that highlights this very notion and how, in order to make any kind of change in your life, it would be best to approach it from its highest possible origin point. And this is why most popular manifestation advice or conventional remedies of any kind, just general life advice or solutions to any problem, don't actually do all that much, as I generally encourage someone to stay in their same layer of consciousness or at the same vantage point without a higher perspective or origin point for said problem or issue. So I will now start by detailing the framework that I mentioned previously to highlight how this system of thinking can help you pinpoint the precise reason for why you are having a problem and how to fix it, or how best to bring in something you are trying to manifest. This can apply for either eliminating something negative in your external life, as well as bringing in some positive circumstances for your life, both of which could be considered manifestation. Essentially, you are manifesting a different outcome than what you are currently experiencing. That is all that manifestation is. It can be driven towards getting rid of negative things and bringing in positive things. Now, there are 5 layers to your consciousness as a being. There is the physical layer, the mental layer, the emotional layer, the energetic layer, and the spiritual layer. Physical layer, just at a high level, quickly going through these. Physical would involve things like your behaviors and your environment. The mental layer would include things like your thoughts and beliefs. The emotional layer would include your emotions. The energetic layer would include your energy field. And the spiritual layer is a vast amount of spiritual forces, which we will dive into later on. And these layers go in order from physical at the bottom to spiritual at the top, where each layer is a driver or primary influence for the layers beneath them, with the spiritual layer being the biggest driver for literally every area of your life, as it impacts all the layers underneath it. I will explain each of these in a bit more detail, where it can become apparent as to the limit or threshold of someone's consciousness, or the layer at which someone is primarily operating from. If someone has no understanding of what I'm talking about when I get to the energetic layer, that is totally okay. It just means that layer is likely not yet consciously accessible for that person. Then, after all that, I will piece together all of these layers together to show how they work together with a real-world example, something that you can use for yourself and pinpoint to see if you may be experiencing something of the sort and how to navigate through these layers to get to the source of the issue. So, beginning now with the physical layer of these 5 layers of consciousness. The physical layer includes things like your behaviors, your actions, the people you engage with, your habits, routines, things like your diet, exercise, health, your state of well-being, your self-care practices, relationships, your environment, so on and so forth. Essentially, the actual results that you're seeing in your external life and the things that you can physically observe and experience through your primary senses. And generally speaking, this is where most advice on literally anything generally focuses on. If you are sick, go see a doctor or try a specific remedy. If you want to have more money, try using specific investment strategies or try to get a promotion at your job. If you want to meet a romantic partner, go where you think that person will be or download a dating app. And if these don't work, then there's nothing else that can be done about it. You're just destined for the results that you get in your physical life, which of course is not true and is the purpose of this entire video. Now moving on to the mental layer. The mental layer includes things like your thoughts and your beliefs and mental patterns, essentially your version of logic that you tend to use for yourself to arrive at your most consistent types of thoughts. And then perhaps most importantly are your psychological parts of self. It is not a very common understanding that we have different and perhaps numerous parts of our own psyche that essentially have their own types of temperament, personality, wants, needs, desires inside of our own psyche. Common terminologies for these parts could be your inner child or your inner critic, so on and so forth. There is a long list of inner parts that we have. And the most direct impact to your physical behaviors in the physical layer are your thoughts and beliefs and these psychological parts of self. If you have a belief of, I can never be successful at such and such an endeavor, then you'll almost certainly never try to be successful in that domain. This is often where manifestation practices and even lots of so-called spiritual guidance and practices tend to focus on. Essentially, as an example, do lots of mental affirmations. Do lots of visualizations of your manifestation happening. Think positively. While this is better than nothing, of course, but there's almost never any acknowledgement of your psychological parts, which may be in conflict with each other. For example, you may want to make more money for yourself, but that would require you to be more public on social media or have more attention on you at your job. One part of one part of your psyche, may want this money and prestige, while another part of you may be scared of being seen to that level, that new level of public presence. The scared part will almost certainly win out and sabotage you. This is how the mental layer is a driver of the physical layer. This part of you that I was just alluding to may be creating thoughts of fear, which then creates fear-based physical actions in the physical layer. And where do those fearful thoughts come from? They come from your emotions in the emotional layer. So the emotional layer includes things like your emotions, your feelings, the emotional state that you may be in a given moment, your emotional patterns and emotional wounds. Essentially, what are you feeling in a given moment, and what is your emotional baseline? What emotions do you have access to? What emotional patterns do you engage in, particularly in close relationships, as those are the types of dynamics that tend to bring out a lot of the repressed or triggers that we may have, repressed emotions and triggers that we might have. And how easily triggered are you, and by what things? The most direct impact to your thoughts and the mental layer and the beliefs in that mental layer are your emotions and what you feel and don't feel. A good example that I will share that I feel like really highlights the impact of the emotional layer on the lower layers is I heard a story of a woman who mentioned that she had experienced very severe abuse in a romantic relationship, which that of course created significant emotional wounding to where she was now afraid of that abuse ever happening again in another romantic relationship. That emotional wounding created a belief and thoughts in her mind that if she looked attractive, she might attract attention from another abuser. So she acted these thoughts and beliefs out by becoming overweight and deliberately not caring for her appearance, as she thought if she was visually unattractive, she would be safe from that prior abuse ever happening again. All of this apparently stemming from the emotional layer and emotional wounds. In mainstream advice, there is generally no acknowledgement of this layer and how it might impact the problems in your life or the things you wish to manifest for yourself, even in so-called spiritual manifestation practices. There is and can be sometimes an encouragement while you are visualizing your ideal life or manifestation happening in the mental layer and in these mental practices that you add the emotion to it to amplify your manifestation. Essentially, placing yourself into this state of who you are when you have what you want. Feel yourself being healed if you have a health problem. Feel yourself what you would feel like with your dream romantic partner that you dream of for yourself. Now, all of this is well and good, better than nothing, of course. It is a step in the right direction, but is just barely grazing the surface of the potentially ginormous well of unprocessed emotions and unhealed emotional wounds that many of us have that influence our physical lives. And even that is not getting to the source of an issue or operating from the source of what drives the external circumstances of your life. The fear that might be present in you as a common emotional state drives the kinds of thoughts that you have, which then influences the outcomes, typically fear-based actions in your physical life. And where do those fearful emotions come from that are creating the fearful thoughts that create the fear-based actions? They come from the energetic layer, typically. So now diving into the energetic layer, this typically includes your entire energy field. If you are unaware, everything is energy. If you zoom in on the smallest of molecules, atoms, the smallest level of reality, you can find that there's essentially just energy. So everything is energy, including your emotions, including your thoughts. Your thoughts and energy, your thoughts and emotion are literally just energy. So this layer includes your energy field. Particularly important are your primary chakra system, your primary energy centers, which align with the central channel of your body going up and down your spinal cord. This includes things like your vitality or life force, which some cultures refer to as prana or chi. This includes energetic distortions and blockages that may appear in your energy field. All of this can be quantified scientifically with scientific instruments. Now, how much vitality do you have, and how is it being directed is something to consider for this layer. How sensitive are you to the subtle planes of pure and invisible energy? Where is energy blocked or distorted? What is your base level of vibration or frequency? Every single one of us emits a frequency or vibration. That is our base level of consciousness. And how are your chakras or your primary energy centers functioning? How open and clear are they? The primary driver of your emotions and emotional patterns is very oftentimes your energy field. As an example, if your primary energetic point of operating from, we typically have a primary energy center that is where we are generally emitting and vibrating from. That is essentially where our base level of consciousness is from. If your primary energetic point of operating is from a distorted root chakra, the lowest of your primary energy centers that is focused on survival needs. The center, when would normally be in a healthy state, would be responsible for things like feeling grounded, stable, and safe. If it is normally in a state of energetic distortion, then that will make fear, worry, and anxiety prominent emotions for you, which will lead to fearful thought patterns and beliefs. It might make it prominent that you have beliefs such as something bad is always right around the corner, which will lead to the decisions you make in your physical life, which will very likely be focused on excessively controlling your environment so none of your fears can come true. This might lead to neurotically being concerned over your safety and preparing for the worst case scenario in your life. So this single energetic distortion can essentially keep you in a permanent state of survival in all of these layers of your life. Not much of humanity is even aware that this layer exists at all. But it is a law of the universe that one will only experience things that they are an energetic match to. Whatever you want to experience, if you aren't aligned to it with your energy field, you will not experience it. As in the example I just shared, where is that energetic distortion and fearful energy coming from that is creating the fearful emotions that are creating fearful thoughts and ultimately fear-based actions? They come from, most oftentimes, the spiritual layer. So now diving into the spiritual layer, which is a very vast layer, could possibly be considered infinity or infinite, but at its core can involve things like your soul's architecture or your soul plan or your soul path. You have a soul, if you are unaware, and your soul takes a great amount of effort and time to plan your life in advance to great specificity with things like soul contracts, which are essentially agreements that are made with other souls, other beings, for essentially what is very likely going to play out with other individuals. This also includes things like ancestral patterns, your ancestry that you are born into, the lineages that you are born into carry distortions of their own, gifts of their own that are naturally inherited or passed down the line to you. You have things like karmic patterns or karmic knots. These are essentially things that you as a soul have experienced many times that can create what is referred to as a karmic knot, or just a pattern that is repeated so many times that is create some type of stuck pattern or a knot that is potentially asking to be released or is continually showing up in your life as a blockage in your external life's circumstances. You also have things like entity attachments or entanglements with other souls or other entities that could potentially be draining your life force or just creating some kind of havoc or distortion in your life. Some questions that align with this layer: what did your soul choose to experience in this life? What karma or prior patterning has it brought with you to potentially resolve in this life? What agreements or soul contracts do you have in place, and for what purpose? For example, an ancestral pattern of scarcity may create energetic restrictions when it comes to abundance in your lower chakras, which generates emotional states of fear around anything to do with finances or working, which then creates mental patterns of thinking that I'll never have enough or I'll always be poor, which then creates a physical life of lack or poverty. This is another layer that is very unknown for much of humanity. Even for those who would describe themselves as spiritual or on a spiritual path, oftentimes haven't been made aware of these types of spiritual forces that are directing their lives in massive ways. The potentially two biggest drivers of your life are essentially your soul's life architecture, your life plan, and your soul contracts, the agreements that you make with other beings and perhaps other entities, institutions, groups. These are things that are planned out in advance. And soul contracts are essentially like gravity fields. You can do all the meditating, all the visualizing and manifestation practices you want. You can affirm to yourself all day, every day about how abundant and prosperous you are and that God is your provider. But if your soul chose to experience seasons of severe poverty as part of its personal evolution and to break the ancestral pattern of scarcity that you were born into, you are essentially guaranteed to experience that season of poverty where money avoids you at all costs. Until, of course, you break the pattern or learn the lesson somehow. That is essentially why these things come into your existence. From your soul's perspective, it takes a huge amount of energy to outrun the directive of your soul contracts and the choices that your soul made for your life before you even started living it. It's not impossible. Plans don't always go as planned, of course, and we do have free will to some extent. But generally speaking, these directives have a massive sway over your life. So, in this example, your soul chose to be born into an ancestral lineage with a pattern of scarcity and lack mindset. This created energetic blockages and distortions in your energy field, likely inherited at birth and reinforced in your immediate family and your immediate environment in your early childhood when it comes to abundance, material safety, and scarcity. This then creates emotional patterns of fear of becoming poor, going bankrupt, becoming homeless, or just not having enough, which creates thoughts or beliefs of, I need to have a certain amount of money to be safe. And this can create rigid spending or saving patterns or a self-sacrificing quest for material security. And ultimately, when you enter the likely predetermined season of scarcity or poverty or financial crisis, it creates a major storm of likely panicked and fearful actions to try to avoid your worst fears coming true. Or they may all just happen so you feel the wounding and break the pattern finally at its source. Now, counterintuitively, this scenario would manifest as the opportunity to heal something at its source of your own soul and your lineage, not as punishment. And trying to manifest your way out of it actually defeats the purpose, which I will explore this notion further a little bit later. But are you starting to see how this all works now? And here is a diagram now to help visualize this entire concept and hopefully help drive this point home a little bit further. All of these layers are interconnected. Nothing exists truly in isolation. All of these layers are impacting each other upwards and downwards. But the higher order layers of consciousness express themselves in the lower layers of your consciousness, as alluded to in another law of the universe, as above, so below. What happens in the higher realms of reality gets mirrored in the lower realms of reality, same within these layers of consciousness. Now I will share one other example to potentially help drive this entire concept home even further. Now, let's say you or someone you know has a terrifying fear of flying, specifically on airplanes. This would show up in your physical layer, your physical experience, the habits, behaviors, and your environment that you can't fly on airplanes. Essentially, it means to get anywhere, you will not be getting on an airplane. Now, what is the mainstream guidance for addressing this phobia that one might have if they're trying to get over it, if they actually want to move beyond this fear? They recognize that this fear isn't serving them. They actually are being limited in their life. They want to actually be able to get on an airplane to travel to other parts of the world that they don't normally have access to. What is the mainstream guidance? Typically, a lot of guidance is staying within the physical layer. Things are recommended such as exposure therapy. Essentially, see what might happen if you get close to a plane, or perhaps simulate what it might be like in being inside of a plane. Maybe watching a movie about planes, or playing a video game that is a flight airplane simulator, or somehow 3D goggles of seeing yourself walk inside of a plane. Feel what it's like to actually be in that environment, and hopefully you gradually stop getting so triggered by it. But that is generally all that's really offered from the physical layer. Just by stating that, very oftentimes that doesn't really do all that much. It is a very common experience that exposure therapy is like bare minimum. It's not generally going to move the needle for a lot of people for something that might feel like a terrifying, overwhelming fear. Now, what is causing this physical behavior of avoiding planes and being in a state of fear? It is being caused by the mental layer, perhaps the belief that something bad will happen if I fly on a plane. The belief is what is preventing you from flying on an airplane. And it is also very likely that part of your psyche, one of your psychological parts, is protecting another part of your psyche from experiencing pain. We have parts of our psyche that could be called manager parts that try to protect these other wounded parts of self. It is very likely that these protective parts are becoming activated to make sure that that wounded part of yourself isn't getting anywhere near an airplane. Now, what is the mainstream guidance if they even approach this mental layer? Again, try to replace that belief with affirmations. I will be having a great time if I fly on a plane. I love flying on airplanes, and just mentally rehearse that in your mind to try to switch the mental pattern, switch that mental thought, switch the belief with a more empowering, positive belief. Perhaps visualize positive outcomes while flying. See yourself having a great time, everything going smoothly on an airplane trip. But what if that is still not actually solving the problem? What if someone has tried all of those things and they still have a debilitating fear of flying on an airplane? What is causing these beliefs and protector parts to get activated to such an extent that they are not allowed to fly on an airplane? It is the emotional layer, very oftentimes. It is the emotion of fear that is very likely going to be very debilitating. The emotion of fear, getting triggered when thinking about flying, creates the belief that something bad will happen if you fly on a plane, which then prevents you from physically flying on airplanes. Perhaps there was an emotional wound generated from a prior flying experience, or maybe someone you know passed away in a plane crash, or maybe you watched something traumatic about plane crashes when you were a young child that created an emotional wounding imprint at a very young and impressionable age. Now, there is generally not much mainstream guidance if this were the case, other than what was already mentioned in the prior layers. But where are those emotions of fear coming from? And again, what if the other practices to try to overcome this fear aren't working? Where are these emotions of fear coming from? They're very likely coming from the energetic layer and your energy field. For example, you may have a severe distortion in your root chakra, which is responsible for feelings of safety. There may be some kind of survival-based template that is embedded inside of your energy field that is being activated when considering the concept of flying. This distortion or survival template in your energy field creates the emotion of fear around flying, which then creates the belief that something bad will happen if you fly, which prevents you from physically flying on a plane. Now, where does this energetic distortion even come from? It is very likely coming from the spiritual layer. Perhaps, and in this specific example, I'd be very shocked if in this specific example, it's not because of this exact reason. It is entirely possible that you experienced a past life where you died in the crashing of an aircraft. Maybe multiple past lives even. Your soul memory that is alive within you carries that memory in your energy field, creating the energetic distortion and survival template, which then creates the emotion of fear around flying, which creates the belief of something bad will happen if you fly, which prevents you from physically flying. The past life experience is the direct cause of this fear. Now, to solve this, one can go directly to the spiritual layer and heal that past life experience that will translate into your present day experience. There's no such thing as time. This is how things work. You can heal something from the past. It will translate to your present experience because everything is energy. Things that existed in the past are also just energy, and all of that is connected. Everything is interconnected through an energy field. So sometimes just becoming aware of this can sometimes be enough to move that blockage, but generally speaking, some kind of healing or processing will be beneficial. This can be done through modalities like past life regression or QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis technique, both of which are forms of hypnosis that essentially take you into a state which kind of shuts down all of those other layers and all of the other potential blockages that won't allow you to address it at the root. Those modalities can take you directly to the root and allow you to heal this experience. And it can be healed at its source, which will then very likely trickle down to all of the other layers. It can, at its source, remove the energetic distortion template, which can allow the emotions of fear to be processed or released, sometimes in that moment, which will naturally bring about a softening of your beliefs and thoughts on the matter, and perhaps may allow that psychological protector part to relax and not be so uptight about this notion, and may eventually allow you some ease around eventually being able to fly on a plane. So I hope that example was helpful for you. Now, putting all of this together for your own real life purposes, maybe this is not the exact scenario that you have experienced. how do you navigate a problem you're facing or manifest something that you desire for yourself with this framework? The first step is going to be getting honest with yourself about where you are at primarily within this framework. If you haven't opened up much to a certain layer yet, and things seem very foreign when I talk about that layer, that is totally okay. It will be waiting for you when you are ready. The best course of action will be to attempt to focus on the highest layer that is accessible to you. Essentially the layer that's going to feel most like your edge, where like you can navigate it. It might be a little bit foreign and new, but it feels like the ceiling for you in a way. It feels like you're being invited or called to go deeper into that layer. That is likely where you're going to be having your attention called, which for many people will be the emotional layer. Lots of people who start doing personal development work are oftentimes well-versed on the mental layer, perhaps doing things like shadow work, focusing on things like their mindset and things of the sort, but have oftentimes yet to delve deep into their emotional landscape. Many people have emotions that have been repressed for most of their life, from experiences when they were very young and created unhealthy emotional coping patterns. It might be worthwhile to feel and release those stuck emotions, to work on opening one's heart in a meaningful manner, and to see how certain emotional patterns are creating issues or blocking your desired manifestations. Healing those emotional patterns could be a major unlock for many people. And then the higher layers might open up and become more apparent in how they are impacting you. But if it is available to you, going straight to the spiritual layer will yield the most encompassing and potent results, as that is the source for just about everything you experience as a human being. Doing things like ancestral healing, understanding and healing your past life karma, removing entanglements with entities or other souls who are holding you back and holding back your progress, communing directly with your own soul to learn what your soul architected for you to experience in this life so you can align with it. I did make another video detailing how to raise your baseline vibration in all of these layers with a more thorough explanation on the inner workings of the spiritual layer and how to work within it for your own healing and expansion. So I will link to that here and in the description if you are curious to dive a little bit deeper. I will now share some counterintuitive notions as one begins to expand into the spiritual layer and uncover how that layer is influencing them in terms of their issues and desired manifestations. Counterintuitively, as you move up into the spiritual layer, you may find the things your human self wants, the things that you're actively putting all this effort into manifestation efforts, the things that your human self wants and what your soul wants can oftentimes not be the same thing, and oftentimes can even be in direct opposition to each other. You may find that the things you think you want may not be actually what you want, but are just inherited and conditioned desires that you impulsively work to manifest for yourself. The problems you face that you work to eliminate or manifest yourself out of are very likely directly chosen by your own soul for its own expansion through you. The truth is, the ego wants comfort, but the soul wants growth. This can be a very challenging notion to reconcile because we still do have human needs, and oftentimes these soul growth trajectories involve a lot of perhaps intense encroachments on our human needs. But this is the truth of the situation. Sometimes getting deep into the spiritual layer doesn't change anything in your physical life, at least in the short term. But it often brings profound clarity and understanding for why it is precisely the way it is, which can bring about some form of peace, or at least acceptance with less resistance to your life circumstances. And as you progress through the spiritual layer in a journey of awakening, healing, and expansion, you may find the things you used to work so hard at manifesting are no longer desirable for you. You may end up simply being present with your life exactly as it is and open to what is truly meant for you without much desire at all to direct any manifestation efforts, which perhaps was the goal your soul had for you all along. This can bring about a disorienting thought exercise on whether you have free will or not, or just the free will of the soul. That is a worthwhile notion to ponder for yourself. So, in closing, I hope this was helpful in understanding the 5 layers of consciousness and how everything in your life fits into these layers with a spiritual origin point. You're invited to examine any issue you may be facing, or anything you wish to manifest, and identify which layer you've been focusing on most, and what is the next layer calling your attention to make a more potent shift for yourself. If you find yourself struggling to make meaningful shifts in a particular domain in your life, or are simply wanting direct guidance as you navigate your shifts and transformations, I do offer one-on-one support in the form of single session journeys and long-term coaching. I have navigated every layer mentioned here in a very deep manner with a thorough explanation on the spiritual forces creating the circumstances of my own life and how to access them for meaningful change. I'd be happy to meet you in whatever you're navigating. you're welcome to reach out through my website link in the description. That wraps up this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.